Okay, we're going to start the nervous system. First, the nervous system is the most important system in our body. It controls everything. Brain and spinal cord and the peripheral nerves make up our nervous system. Some terms here, we have efferent and afferent. Okay, there's this concept of you have the brain and you have the body. So the brain will communicate to the body, and then the body to the brain. Okay, so the fancy way of saying that would be efferent, or brain to body, and afferent, body to brain. Okay, the nervous system has three basic functions, and they are sensory input, integration, and motor output. Okay, so if you think about it, our bodies are constantly bombarding our brain with sensory information. So that would be afferent. The brain's going to think about it or integrate, okay, integration, and then you're going to have this motor response. Okay, motor response would be brain to body or efferent. Okay, here's a diagram that will help with that. So sensory input, and in this case they're showing vision, but it can be anything, taste, sound, touch, even hunger, feelings, whatever. All these things go to the brain, and your body's going to process it, and then you're going to have some sort of motor output. Okay, our endocrine system does work in conjunction with the nervous system. Endocrine is something we'll get more into in ANP2. But the body is going to have afferent, efferent process, and then part of that is endocrine release, which will go into the blood system and then get to the site it needs to go to. Okay, for example, if you're hiking and you see something like a mountain lion or whatever, well, that's sensory input, so there's going to be a little bit of fear that's going to come with that, and then the endocrine system will kick in and release things like cortisol. And the cortisol will float around your system, which will help you with stress. Okay, that is sympathetics. Now we'll talk about sympathetics and parasympathetics later, or in just a little bit. But all this is designed to try to keep the body in homeostasis. Okay, know this diagram. Notice that we have the sensory input here, and they denote sensory with blue. And then over on this side, you see red, which will be denoted for motor output. So with all these slides to come throughout the entire nervous system, you're going to see blue for sensory, red for motor. Okay? So we'll start here. So we have sensory input, and then it goes from the body up through our peripheral nerves, okay, the peripheral nervous system, or PNS, and then eventually goes to our brain, the central nervous system, or CNS, and then our brain is going to integrate whatever the sensory information is and then give the appropriate motor response, which will go from brain to the spinal cord and down through the peripheral nerves. This is efferent. Brain to body is efferent. And so this is our motor response. Okay, now under the motor response, we have two options. in no particular order, option 1 is a somatic or voluntary response, which is our skeletal muscle, because we can choose to move our skeletal muscle. Okay, so that would be voluntary or somatic. The other option, option 2, is autonomic or involuntary response. Our heart beats slower or faster, digestion, breathing, other smooth muscle function that goes on within us. Our glands release, digestive or saliva or whatever. So that would be autonomic or involuntary. Okay, under the autonomic division, we have two choices. We have a parasympathetic response or a sympathetic response. Okay, and a parasympathetic response is your rest and digest response, and the sympathetic response is fight or flight response. Okay, so this is relax, parasympathetic, relax, sympathetic, stress. Okay. Parasympathetic neurotransmitter is acetylcholine, and sympathetic neurotransmitter is epinephrine, norepinephrine. We'll talk more about that later. Okay, our spinal nerves carry information to and from the spinal cord, and the cranial nerves carry information to and from the brain and the brainstem. Okay, now cranial nerves, we have Roman numeral 1 through Roman numeral 12. So 12 pair of cranial nerves, we'll talk about those later, and a bunch of different spinal nerves that run up and down our spine. Okay, sensory or afferent nerves, we have the somatic and the visceral. Okay, somatic comes from skin, skeletal muscle, and our joints. And then visceral, sensory fibers come from our visceral organs. So between the two, sensory input going to the brain, which makes that afferent, it is bombarding the brain with this information so that we can have the appropriate efferent response. In the motor division, we have the somatic and the autonomic, which we discussed earlier on that flow chart.